The cards were black, and they had no limit, and that was the entire point. Daichi Kuroda had them made in a single afternoon, 4 of them, each carrying a different name, each drawn on an account so deep that no purchase any ordinary person could imagine would ever reach the bottom of it. He had done unusual things before to learn what he needed to learn about people. This was not even the strangest. In his experience, there was no faster way to see the true shape of a person's heart than to remove every limit from their reach and watch where they went. He was 41 years old, and he was tired in a way that money could not fix, and the thing he was tired of was not knowing who around him was real. Everyone wanted something from a man like Daichi. He had learned this so young that he could no longer remember learning it. People smiled at him, and the smile was a transaction. They laughed at his jokes, and the laughter was an investment. Women in particular had learned to arrange themselves in his presence like merchandise in a good window, and he had grown so skilled at pricing them that he had almost stopped believing a person could exist who would not, given the chance, take everything he had. His grandmother, before she died, had told him he would end his life alone and rich, and never know which of the two had done it to him. He thought about that more than he admitted. So, 4 cards, 4 women, 1 test. He told each of them the same thing, privately, with no witnesses. Spend whatever you like. There is no limit and no rule. Buy anything. I only want to see what you choose. He said it lightly, as though it were a game, and he watched their eyes, and in 3 of the 4 he saw the same thing light up, the disbelief, and then the hunger behind the disbelief, and then the careful arranging of the face to hide the hunger. The 4th woman was his maid, and she did not want to take the card at all. Before I tell you what each of these women did with a card that had no bottom, and I promise you, what the 4th one bought is going to sit in your chest for a while. Stay with me here. Subscribe if you haven't, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I have a feeling this one's going to reach some corners of the world, and I want to see them. The maid's name was Zola. She had worked in his house for a little under a year. She was quiet in the way that certain people are quiet. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they have learned that no one is listening. And she did her work with a thoroughness that Daichi had noticed and said nothing about. Because saying something about it would have meant admitting he watched her, and he was not ready to admit that even to himself. When he handed her the card, she held it like it might be hot. "Sir," she said, "I don't understand. There's nothing to understand. Spend it. On whatever you want. I'm curious what that is." "I don't want anything, sir. Everyone wants something." She looked at him then, and there was something in her look that he did not often receive. Something that was not fear and not calculation, and it took him a moment to identify it because he saw it so rarely. It was disappointment. She was disappointed in the test itself. She understood exactly what it was, and she thought less of him for needing to run it. "I'll hold the card if you're ordering me to," she said, "but I'd rather not." "Consider it in order, then," Daichi said, and he regretted the words as soon as they were out, because they made him sound like exactly the kind of man her look had accused him of being. The 1st woman was called Reina. She was beautiful, and she knew the precise market value of her own beauty, and she had been circling Daichi for months with the patience of a professional. Within 3 days, the card had bought a car. Not a practical car, a statement, low and red and loud, the kind of object that exists to be seen arriving. Within a week, there was jewelry, and a wardrobe from a house in Ginza whose name Daichi knew because his accountants flinched when they saw it, and a standing appointment at a spa that cost more per visit than his gardener earned in a month. He watched the statements come in, and he felt nothing except a kind of confirmation, which was its own quiet grief. The 2nd woman, Mika, was cleverer. She spent less at first, and she spent it on him. Small gifts, a good watch, a bottle of something rare, things designed to signal that she was not the grasping kind. But the pattern turned quickly, the way these patterns did. The gifts to him stopped, and the purchases for herself began, and by the second week she had bought an apartment. She had it put in her own name. She had assumed, Daichi realized, that he would not check, or would not care, or would be flattered enough by her earlier restraint to overlook the grab when it came. The third woman, Hana, did not bother with restraint at all. She treated the card as a windfall and emptied herself into it, and there was something almost honest in how little she pretended. And Daichi found that he respected her marginally more than the other two for the plainness of her greed. She bought and bought until the buying seemed to become its own hunger, disconnected from anything she could actually use, and when he finally sat with the 3 sets of statements laid out in front of him, he felt the old certainty settle back over him like a heavy coat. This is what people are. This is what I am worth to them. The card, not the man. Then his accountant, a careful old man named Fujimoto, who had handled the family's money for 30 years and was not paid to have opinions, cleared his throat and said, "There's a 4th account, sir. The maid's." Daichi had almost forgotten it. He had assumed Zola had simply put the card in a drawer. "How much?" he said. Fujimoto looked at the paper, and then he looked at Daichi, and there was something odd in his face. "You should see this one yourself, sir," he said. The statement was not long. That was the first thing Daichi noticed. 3 women had produced statements that ran for pages. Zola's was barely half a page. She had not touched the card for the first 2 weeks at all, and then, in a single day, she had made a series of purchases, and Daichi sat and read them one by one and felt something happen in his chest that he did not have a name for and had not felt in a very long time. The first charge was a hospital, a children's hospital on the eastern edge of the city, the kind that treated the families who had nowhere else to go. The amount was large. When Daichi had Fujimoto look into it, the answer came back that Zola had paid, in full and anonymously, the outstanding bills of every child on one particular ward. A ward for long illnesses, the kind that bankrupt families slowly, over months, while the child fights and the parents drown. She had not put her name to it. She had asked, specifically, that it be recorded as an anonymous gift. The hospital had only released the information because the account holder's employer was making the inquiry. The second charge was a school, a small one, in a poor district, the kind that ran on nothing and asked for less. She had bought it a year of supplies, books, warm coats for the winter, in every child's size. A functioning heater for a building that Fujimoto's inquiry revealed had gone 3 winters without one. The third charge stopped Daichi entirely. It was a modest sum by the standards of the day's spending. It had gone to a care facility on the outskirts of the city, a home for the elderly poor, and the notation attached to it was a name. A woman's name. Daichi did not recognize it. He had it looked into. The woman was Zola's former employer, not a kind one. Fujimoto's people, who were thorough, established the story with some difficulty because Zola had told it to no one. Before she came to Daichi's house, she had worked for another family, and that family had treated her badly, worked her past exhaustion, paid her late or not at all, dismissed her finally without reference or notice when the household's fortunes turned. The old woman who now sat forgotten in a care home on the edge of the city was the mother of that house. Her children, when the money ran out, had put her somewhere cheap and stopped visiting. Zola had used the black card to move her to a better facility, a warm one, with good food and staff who checked on her. She had done this for a woman whose family had thrown Zola away like something used up. Daichi sat with the statement for a long time. He was not a man who cried. He had trained the impulse out of himself decades ago, in a life that punished softness. But he sat in his study with a half-page of charges in his hand, and he understood that he had built an elaborate machine to prove that people were the worst version of themselves, and the machine had, entirely by accident, found the one person who was not. And she had spent his fortune on strangers and on a woman who had wronged her, and had asked that her name be kept off every single act of it. Funny thing about a test. It tells you about the people you're testing. But it tells you far more about the person who needed to run it. He sent for her. Zola came to his study the way she came to every room, quietly, with her hands folded and her eyes level. And she saw the statements on his desk, and she understood at once what this was. And something in her posture braced. "I'll pay it back," she said, before he could speak. "However long it takes." "I know I wasn't supposed to. You were supposed to spend it on yourself," Daichi said. "That was the entire point." "I know." "Then why?" She looked at him, and she was quiet for a moment, deciding, he thought, how much of the truth to give a man who had just proven he did not deserve very much of it. "Because I've been poor," she said finally. "Really poor. The kind where you learn exactly what a small amount of money can do, at exactly the right moment. And you handed me an amount of money that stopped meaning anything past a certain point, and I thought about all the places where it would still mean everything, and I couldn't." She stopped. "I couldn't buy a handbag while I was holding enough to clear a whole ward. I just couldn't. I'm sorry if that was the wrong answer to your test." "The care home," Daichi said. "The name on that charge. Fujimoto tells me it's a woman who treated you badly, who threw you out." Zola's face changed slightly. She had not expected him to have found that one. "Yes," she said. "Why her, of anyone? Why spend it on the person who wronged you?" Zola was quiet again. When she answered, she did not answer the way people usually answered him, to please him, to position herself, to win. She simply told him what was true. "Because her children forgot her," she said. "And I know what it is to be forgotten. And I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to become the kind of person who's glad when it happens to someone else, even someone who earned it. The day I'm glad about an old woman sitting alone and cold is the day I've let them turn me into them." She lifted her chin, just slightly. "I'd rather be the fool who paid her heating bill than that." The room was very quiet. Daichi Kuroda had, in his life, sat across from men who could have killed him, and men he was about to ruin, and men who held the fate of everything he owned in their hands, and he had never once, in any of those rooms, felt the thing he felt now, which was a kind of humbling so complete that it left him unable to speak for a moment. He had run the test to find out who was real. He had found out. And he had found out, at the same time, and with the same page, exactly how far he had drifted from being real himself. "The other three," he said eventually. "Sir, you knew this was a test. From the moment I handed you the card, you knew. You said so with your face. Tell me, did you know the others were being tested too?" "I guessed," Zola said. "It wasn't hard. And it never occurred to you to spend, to compete, to make sure you came out ahead of them in my accounting?" She looked at him with something close to pity, then, the same look she had given him the day he handed her the card. "No, sir," she said, "because I wasn't trying to win you. That's the part you built your test around, isn't it? The idea that we were all trying to win you. I wasn't. I was just trying to get through the year and send money home and not become someone I couldn't live with. You weren't the prize. You were my employer. I'm sorry if that's a hard thing to hear." It was. It was the hardest thing anyone had said to him in years, and it was also, he understood, the first entirely honest thing a woman had said to him in longer than he could remember, and the two facts were not unrelated. He dismissed the other three quietly. There were no scenes. Raina kept the car and lost interest the moment she understood there was no fortune behind the man's attention after all, which told him everything the test had been built to tell him. Mika's apartment reverted, through a clause his lawyers had thought to include, and she was gone within the week. Hana simply stopped appearing, as though she had never quite been there. Zola he did not dismiss. Zola he did something far more difficult with. He began, slowly, clumsily, with the grace of a man relearning a language he had forgotten, to treat her as a person rather than a subject of study. It was not a courtship. Not at first. He was too aware of the shape of the power between them to mistake it for one, and to his credit, and it was, for a man like him, a real credit, he understood that a wealthy employer who developed feelings for a maid he had power over was a story that could go very wrong, and that the burden was entirely on him to make sure it did not. So he changed the arrangement first. He gave her a real position, a real salary, real standing, the freedom to leave with her dignity and her savings intact whenever she chose. He made himself a man she could refuse. And only once she could genuinely refuse him did he let her see, carefully, that he hoped she would not. She was suspicious for a long time. She had earned the right to be, but he was patient, and he was consistent, and he stopped running tests. That was the thing she noticed. She told him much later. The thing that finally turned her. He stopped needing to trap people into proving themselves. He had learned from half a page of charges that the proof he wanted could not be extracted. It could only be offered, and a man who spends his life trying to extract it will spend his life surrounded by people worth extracting nothing from. They married in the spring, the year after. She wore no jewelry from Ginza. She had never bought herself a single thing with that card, and she did not start now. When the families of the children she had quietly saved learned, eventually, who the anonymous benefactor had been, because these things surface, in time, some of them came to the wedding and stood at the back and cried, and Daichi watched his wife go to each of them and hold their hands and insist, still, that it had been nothing. His grandmother had told him he would die rich and alone, and never know which had caused the other. She had been wrong in the end, but only barely, and only because of one woman who refused to spend money on herself while a child was sick and an old enemy was cold. Here is the thing about wealth that the wealthy learn too late, if they learn it at all. It cannot buy you the one thing you actually need from another person, which is to be chosen when you are not the prize. It can only buy you the company of people who are counting. The moment you understand that, you understand that the richest person in any room is the one who would give it all away for a stranger and never sign their name. Daichi had spent a fortune to learn who was real. In the end, the lesson cost him nothing, and it was worth everything, and it fit on half a page. Never measure a person by what they take when you offer them everything. Measure them by what they give when they think no one is counting.